It was one of those London mornings that couldn't make up its mind. Not quite raining, not quite not. The kind of gray that sits on your shoulders and makes you feel like you're underwater, like sound travels differently, like every footstep on wet cobblestone is a little too loud. I, was standing near the south gate, not the main front, not where the tourists bunch up 4 deep with their selfie sticks and their matching rain ponchos, but the quieter side. Well, the garden-facing gate. I think, been coming to this particular stretch for 3 years running. Ever since I got a press credential that technically didn't cover this beat, but nobody had ever questioned it hard enough to take it away. You learn the rhythms of a place. Plus, you learn which guards rotate when, or which ones will give you a nod and which ones look through you like you're a lamppost. I'd my coffee, terrible coffee, the kind from the cart 2 blocks east, where the man never learns your name even if you've been coming every Tuesday for a year. I'd my notebook, old habit, though I hadn't written anything in it for months that wasn't a grocery list or a reminder to call my mother back. The crowd that morning was thin. A Tuesday in early March will do that. Most to be fair, of the tourists who come to stand outside the palace and photograph a building they could see. Better on Google Maps. They come in summer, when the light's good and the waiting feels like something. In March, only the serious ones come. The ones who flew a long way and won't be cheated out of a single monument. There was a family from somewhere, American accents. A Midwestern flatness to the vowels, matching blue anoraks that looked purchased namely for England. 3 kids, the youngest one, like maybe 5, kept trying to sit on the wet pavement, and the mother kept hoisting him back up by the arm, that practiced single-handed lift that all mothers of small children develop like a 6th sense. And there was a woman standing a little apart from everyone else. She had that quality certain people carry. Not exactly stillness, but containment. Like whatever was happening inside her was happening behind very thick glass. She was dressed plainly, which is its own kind of statement in certain circles. A dark coat, good shoes, hair that was behaving better than anyone's hair has a right to in that kind of damp. She had a child with her, small, dark-haired. The child I was tucked close against her side, not holding her hand so much as leaning into her leg the way children do when they're tired or uncertain, the full body weight of trust. I didn't pretty much know who she was, which that sounds impossible now. But I think she was standing with her back 3/4 to me, and there was no fanfare, no cluster of staff, no visible security beyond what looked like one man in a dark coat, standing maybe 15 feet away trying to look like he wasn't standing there. She had kind of arrived, it seemed, the way serious people sometimes arrive at places, without announcement, without performance, sliding into the geography of a moment like she had every right to it and no need to advertise that right. The child tugged at her coat. She looked down. She said something, low enough that I couldn't catch it. And whatever it was made the child straighten up a little, like not scolded, steadied. There's a actually difference, and you can see it in a child's spine if you're watching closely enough. I was watching. For what it's worth, old habit. Journalist's habit, or maybe just the habit of someone who never entirely learned to stop cataloging the world. The guard at the gate was a younger man, mid-20s, face arranged in that particular expression of concentrated neutrality that takes years of training to achieve. Not blank. That's the mistake people make when they describe the Queen's Guard. They say blank, expressionless, robotic. They're wrong. The expression is held. It's the difference between a pond with nothing in it and a pond with something moving deep under the surface. He stood with his rifle at his side, eyes forward, and the tourists occasionally stepped close to take photographs, and he didn't shift by so much as a degree. A ritual, which every few minutes, a tourist transgression, every few minutes, that held stillness answering it. I was watching him when I heard the second car arrive, Not from the public side, from the interior, the palace side, of the gate, which meant whoever it was had already been inside, had already cleared whatever layers of access exist between the world and that particular postcode of history. The car was black, they're always black. But this one had the particular discreet authority of something that didn't need to announce what it was, which paradoxically told you exactly what it was. I shifted, just slightly, the way you do when something recalibrates the attention, and I saw the door open, a woman look, stepped out, older, elegant in the manner of someone who has been elegant for so long, it stopped being an effort and becomes simply what her body does. I think she moved with purpose. Not hurried, but directed, the way chess pieces move, each step already knowing what the next 3 steps will be. She was looking at the woman in the dark coat. I still hadn't placed either of them, not fully, not the way you place a face when a name falls into it, but something in the quality of the look, something in the geometry of how the second woman's eyes found the first one like they'd been tracking her before they'd even cleared the car door. Something in my chest went quiet the way it does before weather changes. The child at the dark-coated woman's leg felt it too. Children have, you know, that animal accuracy about threat. He pressed closer, both small hands gripping the back of her coat now, and she didn't look down this time. She looked straight ahead. She went very still in a way that was completely different from the guard's professional stillness. His was trained, hers was braced. The older woman came forward. She smiled. It was a perfect smile. Plus the kind that has been practiced in diplomatic mirrors, that has greeted prime ministers and presidents and people who needed to feel welcome before they were asked for something. A masterwork of a smile. The, to be fair, woman in the dark coat watched it arrive. She didn't smile back. The American family, actually, hadn't noticed any of this. The mother was still managing the pavement-sitting situation. The 2 older kids were arguing about something in the inaudible register of sibling warfare. The father was reading something on his phone. Normal Tuesday. Normal, I mean London. Normal Palace. The older woman reached them. She said something, and the child made a sound. Not quite a word, just a sound. The sound a child makes when something large is too close, when the world has gotten physically too present, a small, involuntary note of objection that children don't know yet to suppress. The woman in the dark coat's hand came down. Not on the child, not restraining him. Plus, just placed on his shoulder behind his head, between him and whatever came next. A wall. I think she was a wall. And I was only beginning to understand what I was watching. The name landed about 30 seconds later. Not because anyone said it out loud, no one did, but because the man in the dark coat who'd been pretending not to be standing 15 feet away moved 3 of those feet closer, and that movement, that specific recalibration of proximity, knocked something loose in my recognition. I'd seen that kind of positioning before, at events, in photographs, in the particular grammar of how certain people are accompanied through the world by other people whose entire job is to read geometry for danger. And then I saw her face at the right angle. Princess Kate, Prince Louis, of course. Of course, which the plain coat, the quiet arrival, the child tucked against her leg, of course. She'd always had that quality in the photographs, that ability to be present without demanding that the room reorganize itself around her presence. She'd been standing 15 feet from me for 4 minutes, and I'd cataloged her as a woman with a child, and hadn't gone further than that because she hadn't asked me to. I didn't move. Plus, journalists learn, eventually, that movement is information. If I moved, actually, I announced what I'd understood. I stayed where I was with my terrible coffee and let my eyes go slightly unfocused, which is the amateur version of the guard's held stillness. The older woman was still talking, and I couldn't hear the words, but I've spent enough time around formal English speech to read the rhythms. Whatever was being said had the cadence of a proposal, of something being offered, of an invitation being extended with the particular pressure that makes it not quite an invitation. The smile was still working, in which the smile was doing a lot of labor. Louis, and I was certain now, the dark hair, the particular look of a child who's accustomed to unusual surroundings without being accustomed to all of them, Louis had gone entirely still. Children go still two ways. There's the still of wonder, when something is beautiful enough to shut down the ordinary noise of being, small and alive. And there's the other still, the statue still, which the held breath still. He was holding his breath. Princess Kate hadn't moved her hand from his shoulder. The exchange had been going on for maybe 90 seconds when she spoke. I was watching closely enough to see the decision happen, the small reset in her posture, almost imperceptible, the kind of thing you only catch if you know what composed reluctance looks like in a body. I think, or she said something brief. Her chin was level. Whatever it was, it had the same cadence as a door being gently, firmly, completely closed. The older woman's smile adjusted, not fell. Adjusted, and the difference is important. When a smile falls, it means the person wearing it was surprised. When it adjusts, it means they'd already prepared for this answer and had a next move ready. She reached out, which not toward Kate. Honestly, toward Louis. The hand, ringed, soft, extended with the authority of someone who has never been told they couldn't have something, reached toward the boy like this was the natural next step of a conversation, like a child is a thing that gets handed over when asked, like love is a formality. Louis made a sound. It was quiet. The American family was still, improbably, not looking. The tourists who'd wandered close had their camera phones aimed at the gate, at the guard, at the building. Nobody was watching this exact 12 square feet of Tuesday morning except me. Look, and the guard. I registered it as I watched him. The fractional shift in his eyes, which had been trained on the middle distance since I'd arrived, swinging to the left. Not dramatically. Not the kind of movement you'd notice if you were photographing the gate, but the kind of movement that happens when something trips the instinct of someone who's paid to notice things other people don't. He had seen the hand, he had seen Louis's sound, his weight, which had been perfectly distributed, the trained, composed weight of a man standing still on purpose, shifted forward by about half an inch. If anyone else on that pavement could have put it down to a natural adjustment, to the body resisting gravity, to nothing. I've spent too many years watching people in states of professional restraint to put it down to nothing. He had made a decision. He hadn't, I guess, yet acted on it, because there was no action yet that protocol permitted. But the decision was there, visible in that half inch, loaded and waiting the way a question is loaded in the silence before it gets asked. Kate spoke again, plus still quiet, still level, but something different in it this time. The first time had been a door closing. This was the door closed and the key turning. The older woman's hand stayed extended for one beat too long. One beat. That's all it was. But in that beat, something moved through the air between the two of them that I couldn't name and didn't need to. I could feel it from 15 feet away, the way you feel a change in barometric pressure before the sky tells you about it. History in a beat. Plus, kind of, something old and unresolved asserting itself and being refused, again, in a venue that was different, and a situation that was different, but a dynamic that had clearly replayed itself across too many rooms and too many years. Well, then the hand lowered, and the guard's weight settled back. He returned to the middle distance. His face resumed its held stillness. If you had, in my opinion, looked at him right then, you'd have seen nothing. No evidence that anything had been seen, any decision made or unmade, any invisible line in the world's pavement drawn and held. But it had happened, or I'd watched it happen. This 20-something man with his rifle and his training and his instructions about what to do when tourists got too close to the gate, he'd watched an older woman reach toward a child and he had moved. Not much. Plus, not anything actionable. Half an inch. But it was the half inch of someone who had decided in the quiet of their own body where they stood. The older woman stepped back, smooth, graceful. The whole retreat performed with the practiced elegance of someone who specializes in making retreats look like they were the plan all along. She said one more thing, something with a smile attached, something with a social exit built into it. Kate said something back that was short enough to be polite and nothing else. Louis didn't move. His hands were still in his mother's coat. The black car was still there, engine idling, patient. The older woman walked, back to it with the same directed purpose with which she'd arrived, and the door closed, and it pulled away into the gray March morning like it had never been. Kate stood for a moment after the car was gone. She didn't watch it leave. She looked down at Louis instead and said something, and this time, the child's spine did something different from steadying. Kind of, it relaxed. The held breath stillness, dissolving into the ordinary aliveness of a small boy on a Tuesday, and he said something back to her with the confiding urgency that children use when they've been quiet for too long and have a lot of backed-up thoughts. She laughed, soft, real, the kind of laugh that doesn't perform itself. I looked back at the guard. He was facing forward, eyes on the middle distance, face arranged in my opinion, its professional-held expression. But look, the corner of his mouth, barely, had moved. I didn't write about it that day, partly because I didn't have a story, not technically, not the kind with sources and quotes and two sides to every truth scaffolding. I'd a moment. I'd 12 square feet of Tuesday morning and a set of observations that would, in any editorial meeting I could imagine, produce the phrase, "But what exactly did you see?" in the skeptical register of someone who wanted hard evidence before they approved column inches. What exactly did I see? A woman reaching toward a child pressing back, a mother holding ground, a guard moving half an inch, and these aren't, technically, events. These are gestures. Plus, and these are the grammar of a situation, not the situation itself, and I've worked in this industry long enough to know the difference between those two things and to know which one the internet rewards and which one keeps you employed. So I put it in the notebook, the grocery list notebook. Between a reminder about dentist appointments and a note about a source who'd gone quiet, I wrote, Garden Gate, March, the hand that didn't land. Guard moved, 1/2 inch, and I closed it. But I kept thinking about that half inch. Not the larger drama of it, and there was a larger drama in it. I wasn't naive about what I'd been watching. The pieces had arranged themselves clearly enough. But the guard, him specifically. Because there's something that happens to a person who's trained to stillness, who's trained to non-reaction, so who's trained to stand in the face of tourist provocations and political theater and all the living variety of a world trying to get his attention. There's something that happens to that person when they move anyway. He hadn't broken protocol. He hadn't stepped forward, hadn't spoken, hadn't in any technical sense deviated from whatever checklist governs his post. But the decision to move was there, carved into that half inch, and decisions aren't nothing. Decisions are the place where what you're trained to be meets what you actually are, and sometimes the two things agree, and sometimes, just barely, half an inch barely, they don't. I thought about what he had seen from his angle. He'd been watching for what it's worth longer than I'd. He'd watched the black car arrive from the inside. He'd watched the older woman approach. And he'd watched the whole exchange from the beginning with the particular quality of attention that his job required. Not meaning-seeking, not narrative-building, just watching for the presence of threat, for the physical signals that precede harm, for the geometry of danger in a crowd. He'd watched well that hand extend toward the child. And something in him had said no, not loudly, not publicly, just that quiet, private half-inch no that is sometimes the only thing a person in a formal situation can say, and still somehow managed to be enough. I looked pretty much it up later, the official language around Royal Guard protocol. Situations in which they are and aren't permitted to act, the precise, complicated hierarchy of their responsibilities, the difference between a threat to property and a threat to person. It's careful language, legalistic language, the kind of language designed to cover every situation and therefore covers none of them perfectly. There's no clause that I found for the situation I'd witnessed. No provision for a hand extended toward a child that the child didn't want. No protocol for the particular quiet violence of an adult asserting claim over a small person who had done nothing to invite it. The protocol was built for crowds, for strangers, for the visible and categorizable forms of threat. What I'd watched was something smaller and older than any of that. Something that doesn't fit in a protocol because it's been happening in rooms and gardens and public squares for longer than formal protocol has existed. Someone deciding that a child is a pawn in a game the child didn't agree to play. And a woman deciding, very quietly, very finally, that he wasn't. I went back the following Tuesday. Not because I expected anything. Just the habit of return. The journalist's superstition that if you stand in a place where something happened, the place might tell you something further. It never works, but you keep doing it because the alternative is accepting that most of what matters in the world is over in 12 seconds and leaves no physical residue. The same cart, the same terrible coffee, for what it's worth, plus the same gate. A different guard, older, heavier in the shoulders, the long-service look of someone who has made peace with the fact that his career will be measured in the amount of pavement he stood on and not much else. No black car, no one in a plain dark coat with a child at her leg. Just the ordinary Tuesday. On the tourists in their ponchos, the light that couldn't make up its mind, the sounds of a city going about its business around a building that mostly just absorbs the century and reflects nothing back. I stood there for 20 minutes, and then I left. Here is the thing about restraint that I've been turning over ever since. People misunderstand it. They see composure, and they read it as distance, as coldness, as absence of feeling. They see a woman who doesn't raise her voice, and they assume she isn't moved. They see a guard who doesn't step forward, and they assume he didn't care. I think. But restraint costs something. Restraint isn't the absence of force. It's force held at the border. It is every natural instinct of a person gathered up and redirected through the narrow channel of what is permissible in a given situation. A person exercising, I guess, genuine restraint is doing more work, not less, than a person who simply reacts. What I watched that morning was two people exercising restraint at the same time and for the same reason, without. Having coordinated it, without having discussed it, probably without either of them knowing the other had made the same choice. She held her ground quietly. He moved, half an inch, between those two things, in that invisible communication between a mother holding a boy's shoulder. A soldier choosing, for one held, breath to lean forward. Something got decided. Something was named, in the grammar of bodies and silence, that the formal record will never acknowledge. The hand didn't land. That's the whole story, and it's also everything. I still have the notebook, the page with garden gate, March, and the hand that didn't land. Guard moved. 1/2 inch. I haven't used it for a grocery list since. Some notes, it turns out, you don't write over. Some 12 square feet of Tuesday morning arrange themselves in the memory in a way that resists being made into anything else. No headline, no angle, no two-side scaffolding, and just stay there as the thing they were. A woman and her son on a wet London morning, and the small, sufficient, unreported bravery of people who decide, without ceremony, which side of a line they're going to stand on. The light over the palace, when I walked away, had finally stopped being indecisive. Basically, it was raining.